dare to be. Where there's injustice, you have to condemn it. You might not think you're going to make a difference, but you have to. You might need a break, you take a sabbatical, and you get back up. That's what I've had to do. I grew up in Zimbabwe. Excuse the red dot there, but if you can see Zimbabwe there, that's where I was born. It's only a small country, but it has the potential of being the breadbasket of Africa. When I was growing up, I was born in 1964. It was Ian Smith government, and we had sanctions against our country. We grew up in a war. So I have good memories of my childhood. The reason my book is called Marshmallow Fishes is the journalist that was my co-writer and ghostwriter. He took that from my childhood. It was a treat my mom used to give us because I used to be a swimmer. So he took that. I wasn't going to call it that, but I think he's quite clever giving it that title. What it represents is a childhood blown apart by a dictator. I was born in Bulawayo. It's the bottom half of the country. Okay. At the top half of the country, Harare, that is Mugabe, ZANU-PF. He attacks everybody against him. The Ndebele nation is the bottom half of the country. So I'll just divide that into two groups. If you could paint them different colors, that would make sense, but because everybody's black, people take genocide, they ignore it because it's black on black. But I don't care who it is, you have to stand up and fight. Okay, my book, how it came about, I was held hostage in Zimbabwe. I'll tell you a bit more about that in a while. And this wonderful man on the top left-hand corner was the editor of the Western Morning News. But before I go there, I'll tell you a bit of how I got here. Growing up in Rhodesia was a war. My brother was blown up 4 times in a landmine. He's got a messed up leg now, but he has a wonderful sense of humour. Don't take away all the bad stuff from here because we have got a macabre sense of humour. And so we decided to immigrate to Australia in 1985. Mugabe came to power in 1980. I was 16 years old. But British politics put him into power. It wasn't an election. We had no choice. And we knew what was going on, but the outside world had it in their head that it was black against white, which has never been that way. And when Mugabe came to power in 1980, I was hoping it would be good that he came to power. But in 1982, he was committing genocide against the Matabele people in the most horrendous way, horrific. I won't even describe it because I wouldn't want to put it in your head. But he called that Jikurahundi. The Jikurahundi was washing away the chaff of the wheat. It sounds gentle and poetic, but it was genocide on its biggest scale. And why I was upset with Britain was because I gave them 10 points for putting me in power, but they ignored the atrocities after that. 2 years into his reign, they should have had him at The Hague for war crimes. My website is Marshmallow Fishes, zim.com. Apparently the internet's dropping in and out, so I'm going to avoid the internet until the end. Okay, so why I chose, well, Barrie, my co-author, helped to choose that picture on my book. It's to represent the pristine of what Zimbabwe could be and the rainbow of hope. That's Birchenough Bridge, same guy who designed Sydney Harbour Bridge. I broke down in Birchenough and I spent 2 nights with a war vet, but I'll come back to that. Rural Zimbabwe. I immigrated in 1985. I didn't settle. I couldn't settle here, so I ended up driving across Australia. I was selected to represent my country at the Moscow Olympics for swimming, but because of the political divide, I was not allowed to go. And then, because of my unsettledness from my childhood, even though I was appreciative of being in Australia, I wanted to be in my homeland. So to to get over that, I took up underwater hockey, and then I represented Australia in the 1994 Trans-Tasman Series against New Zealand and South Africa, and Australia won gold. So top 3 countries in the world. And then I still couldn't settle. I bought a house in Perth, and then my brother got sick. He was still in Zimbabwe. And I ended up going back to Zimbabwe and in 1996. While I was there, I had my own business, and I ran a safari camp, and I also traveled the country doing bookkeeping and information technology stuff, because being a third world country, it was still backward on third world on IT stuff. But then in 2000, Mugabe decided, 1999, he decided to run the yes-no referendum. Basically what he was doing was testing the waters to see what his popularity was. Having grown up with this, we knew there was a backlash coming. So what his rhetoric was, oh no, he accepts the people's choices, but the fact of it was, that's when the farming land grab started to happen. He uses food as a political weapon. You can see here, can you imagine this happening in Australia? This is by choice. He uses that and he starves the people. So, for me, International Women's Day is a huge event because the women in Zimbabwe don't have a voice. When, I don't know if anyone follows cricket, Henry Alonga and Andy Flower stood for the death of democracy with the black armband. Because Job Sekala, a member of parliament, was being tortured about 5 minutes from the cricket ground and electrocuted, and he didn't even get a sentence in the newspaper. So if he has no voice, what voice do the voiceless have? So, and Mugabe gets away with it. I'm going to attempt to do this. I don't know if it will. They're told it's dropping out. This is a friend of mine I went to school with. She's been arrested 38 times. Just as we're sitting here now, we would have been arrested in Zimbabwe. And I know it's hard for you to take on board. Hopefully it'll work. This is Jenny Williams, Woman of Zimbabwe.
My name is Jenny Williams. I am a founder, national coordinator of Women of Zimbabwe Arise. Our mandate is to peacefully protest and demand respect for social justice and women's rights in Zimbabwe. I am a woman. I'm an African woman.
Oh, it's not showing?
And I fight for women's rights in Zimbabwe. And I fight for those rights in a way that maybe not other women do. You might use academic circles. You might use papers, you might use television, you might use radio. But for us, when we stand in the streets of Zimbabwe holding our placards and demanding respect for our issues and respect for ourselves as women of the nation, mothers of the nation, that's also fighting for human rights. That's also fighting for women's rights. And I think the message I really want to give other women human rights defenders is we mustn't be the discriminating people. We must learn that all women are equal and we have different ways and methods of fighting for our rights, and we should be all-encompassing and include all classes of women, because quite often we are quick to say this person is an uneducated person and what will they know of human rights. But for me, the most important thing, the uneducated woman that I fight alongside and arrested alongside in Zimbabwe are very rich in common sense, and for me common sense is more important than any university degree.
So that was Jenny Williams, Woman of Zimbabwe Rise. She's been arrested 38 times, she's been in prison, she's been tortured, but she still stands. And sometimes when you have fear, you've got to stand because we've got nothing else left. When you've got a situation in a country that has been taken to that extent. Thank you. Barrie put this picture in my book. Basically what he's saying is, this is my family before everything happened. So we were a normal family, like every family. More than murder, rape, torture, Mugabe's also split families, and it's fragmented our nation terribly. That is my brother after he hit one of his landmines. He was injured there. Someone said they hope he's got scotch in that cup. Didn't have. That guy at the back there, he's sitting guard in case of an ambush. I used to swim for Rhodesia, and then Zimbabwe. I was national backstroke champion. And early morning training, I used to start early before school, and we used to swim 4,000 meters before school. That's me in the middle there. That's my dad. And my sister's on the left. And then on the left there's me when I was on my last swimming event for my country, because even though I couldn't go to the Olympics, they then banned us from competing against South Africa. So what's the point of competing against yourself? And then on the right is me in my Australian tracksuit. I wanted to see if I could make it in a big pond, and I'm gladly I did. This is the safari camp I ran for a short time. Mugabe has killed tourism. They're still trying to keep it alive, but now he's trying to attack that. And what worries me about that is the animal rights. This is the Hyde Safari Camp in Wangi National Park. When I went back to Zimbabwe, I had my own business, and because I was on the safari camps, we had to evacuate. They were coming to kill us. But luckily, because it's a wild area, they came together on an airstrip and gave us time to escape. I had a truck, and I travelled from the place I was in to Chimanimani Mountains, which is a beautiful part of the world. It borders Mozambique. And the man I went to help there is Roy Bennett. He was a member of parliament for the Movement for Democratic Change, opposition to Mugabe. Mugabe hates him because he is white, and the Africans love him. So before the land grabs, farming was abundant. The people were eating. And then that's Roy on the left. They jailed him for a year and tortured him. You can see the African people, for them to be doing that, it shows you how brave they are, because they would have been, people have lost their lives supporting him. I was held hostage with his wife. I was only at the farm for 4 days. So I didn't know the area, and I was in the office, and Heather, typically on a farm, we were not wearing shoes. Heather was 5 months pregnant. There was about 50 war vets. It's Mugabe's, war vet is a false name actually. It's Mugabe's henchmen. They came up the road with machetes, and I said to Heather, what do we do, Heather? She says, okay, let's run, and we'll put the dogs in the house, because we'd seen a farmer's dogs being bludgeoned to death. And I had a cockatoo, old Archie. He didn't live in his cage. I ran and put him in the aviary, and I had a puppy, and I put the puppy in my shirt. It was a tiny little Jack Russell. So we were in the house, and they surrounded it, and we managed to phone Roy, and I managed to phone my brother, who wanted to come in with the cavalry, but luckily Roy wasn't there, because it was a planned assassination of Roy. Instead, they took us hostage, and we were there for about 7.5 hours. They had about 300 of Roy's loyal black farm workers sitting on the ground, and we were forced to chant Mugabe slogans like Pambere ZANU-PF, which is forward ZANU-PF, and Pasine MDC, meaning down the MDC, being opposition, being Roy. And women with babies on their back, they were all forced to sit on the ground while we were in the rain chanting. And we had to witness horrific beatings of these people. And 3 were raped and 2 were murdered. We managed to escape without, you can read my book. But Heather, sadly, she lost her little boy. She was 5 months pregnant. So before everything, you can see what Mugabe has done to the farming. So now the nation starves. So that's part of the land grab here. The farm workers are displaced. We are displaced. it's very hard to go through, you're trying to make a living and you have to go back to work the next day after experiencing what I just experienced. And post-traumatic stress, I didn't know about that until after all of this. And that's, you end up, it's very hard to function. And how Roy's functioned, I have no clue. That's the road system. We've got a sense of humour in Zimbabwe. You see the guy fishing? That's the state of the roads in Zimbabwe. And starving billionaire, literally the truth. The inflation rate is off the wall. And that sign at the bottom, it makes me smile. No Zim dollars be allowed to use them in the toilet. Somebody must have been getting drunk in the pub. They counted the squares on a toilet paper, roll of toilet paper, and it was cheaper to use Zimbabwe dollar notes. I know. See, $100 billion buys 3 eggs. I won't bother about that there, but I was trying to explain the different areas. So Mugabe tries to starve his opposition. That's the inflation. If you had inflation here at 10%, everybody would be up in arms. Can you see ours? I was using a farm plan, a package, a UK package called Farm Plan, and we literally had to ask the manufacturers of Farm Plan in Britain to extend the field for bank accounts because we had to add about 6 extra zeros. Can you imagine that? If you're a bookkeeper, you know what I'm talking about. So at the top there is I got to Britain with £10 in my pocket. I got robbed of all my foreign currency. I didn't realise I had post-traumatic stress, but with that £10 I still functioned because I was helping refugees from being deported back to Zimbabwe. They had no status, no refugee status. The British government didn't recognise them, and a deportation at that time is a death sentence. And before I got there, can you see these little kids at the bottom? Operation Marambitsvina was another episode that Mugabe did. He didn't like the slums and the poor people in the capital of Harare. It takes away from his opulence. And he mowed down 750,000 houses. Whether it be a 2-bedroom house, a little shack, it's still somebody's home. And that little kiddie there actually got burnt in the process. So this is the homeless and landless and the destitute. And that's what he did. I mean, how the world sat back and let that happen again is beyond me. This is the opulence of Mugabe. That's his home. And Mugabe's celebration birthday, he spent about 3 million on his birthday while his nation starves. That's after Roy came out of prison and I was in Britain. The first time I'd seen them in years, I cried. I was so happy. You can see Heather and I look similar. Heather's on the left, I'm on the right. That helped us, saved us when we were being held hostage, because I wasn't letting on that I wasn't Mrs. Bennett. Or they call Roy Pachedu, Mr. Pachedu. What that means is one of us. That's the Africans give you a name, it's a compliment. So they kept on calling me Mrs. Pachedu and I was ignoring them. So that's Heather on the left. As a result of this, I met Barrie Williams. I met Roy Lipscomb first, a journalist in Cornwall, and he said to me, Kath, get hold of a man called Barrie Williams. He's a journalist, he's got a big heart, and he's known as a fighter. So as a result, I was terrified. I went and saw Barrie, and he got me to Downing Street with a petition. The gentleman nearest the Downing Street door is Michael Ancram. He was the Shadow Foreign Minister at the time. And the gentleman in the middle is Neil Parish, member of the European Parliament. And we took this petition to Downing Street, but to no avail. I am still stunned. I don't know why they sit back, because this was in 2003, they were going into Iraq, and when they had ousted Saddam Hussein, Neil, the guy in the middle, said they've drawn a line in the sand. If you're going to oust one dictator, Britain had more responsibility and loyalty to our nation than Iraq, and they still ignore. How much do you have to do? So that's just one of the pictures. Somebody told me how to deal with post-traumatic stress. I must be proactive. That's hence this book. And what was happening at the time, I was trying to stop the World Cup cricket taking place in Zimbabwe because I was terrified for the cricketers. As a result, Henry Alonga, that guy on the right, and Andy Flower on the left, they did a protest, the Black Arm protest. Henry had to go into hiding, and I had 5 pounds to my name. I'm running in the rain and the snow to tell the BBC. They said, text the BBC if you have an opinion. And Tim Lamb, the ICC guy, was saying it was safe to go to Zimbabwe, so red flag to a bull. I ran in the rain, and I'm texting. I had to run like 2 miles in the rain to go and borrow another 5 pounds to put a phone card on my phone. And I thought, Kathleen, we've lost it. I'm now loopy, I've lost it. But I texted 19058, if you remember the number, held hostage, not safe for cricketers. Tim Lamb is talking crap, basically. And if you want to call me, this is my number. And I walked back crying, and I'm thinking, I've lost it. I thought, out of 60 million people in Britain, they're going to answer my text. They did. The producer of 5 Live Sports, I was stunned. Tommy's not watching. He rings me and he says, Kathleen, I don't know who you are, but my staff pick up these text messages. He says, but for some reason, I've picked up yours out of all those messages. Well, that led to getting Henry to Britain safely because he was in hiding in South Africa. And then after that, it got more publicity, but publicity is one thing, results are another. I guess it's all that chipping away at the block to get things to happen. This is Barrie Williams here. He is interviewing Tony Blair. Robert Mugabe with a selfie, that's in my book. This is a letter I got from Father Peter. This book that I've written, the proceeds of this book are going to go to help a mission in Zimbabwe, but without reading it too much. Basically, he sent me a letter when I was in England asking if I could help him with one person that was grinding maize, because Mugabe had made it illegal to grind maize, and he needed to feed the orphans. He had 420 orphans, and basically he says the elderly and the orphans are literally dying around him. And I love how, like it's nothing, and if you're up this way, kindly pop in. Such a huge thing, it actually broke me. That's Father Peter. He's still there, and this is what my aim is, to help him, because to do it on his own is almost beyond. While I was doing all of this, I met a gentleman with Huntington's disease, and I was helping him. He was the youngest in the history of the British SAS ever to make selection. I was so privileged to look after him. That's Sean Hill. You can see he's sick, to a man of that caliber. Unfortunately, because of his illness, he killed himself, but he's a chapter in my book. He had a wicked sense of humour. He also gave me a lot of uphill. So that's basically my story. It's a big one to take in, but the book isn't miserable. It's actually got a lot of humour in it. So that's it. I'm hoping that it makes a difference, and thank you for having me.